Part 1 of Not So Best Friends on AO3. Prologue. A Boy and His Best Friend.
It was the year 1987, and in the small town called Hawkins, the place I called home, the streets were still quiet and dark. The streetlights illuminated the empty roads. The neighbors seemed to be fast asleep, and the morning sun bathed my older sister's bedroom in a golden yellow glow. But I couldn't sleep. I lay wide awake on a shabby mattress, absent-mindedly staring holes into the pink ceiling above me. It felt like everything in this room was pink and smelled faintly of old school books. Pink wallpaper covered the walls. A rosy chair stood in the corner beside Nancy's bed, and my head rested on an uncomfortable pink pillow. It wasn't that I had anything against feminine room decor, but I simply didn't like Nancy's room. It was probably just because it belonged to my older sister. At that point, it was about principle. I rolled onto my right side and desperately tried not to think about everything that still lay ahead of us. The fight against Vecna, the military, breaking quarantine rules, upcoming school exams, and, well, my own internal battle. The battle of my feelings. I wanted to push those thoughts aside, but ever since the Byers had moved in with us, that had become nearly impossible. For the past 18 months, my best friend Will Byers, the boy I was hopelessly in love with, and the rest of the Byers family had been living with us, and I still couldn't believe how quickly time had passed since Hawkins had been torn into 4 pieces. Our small town had been split apart by an interdimensional monster named Vecna, who had once been called Henry and had actually been human once. Ever since the so-called earthquake, Hawkins had been under quarantine, and although many people had left town, my family had thankfully decided to stay and take the Byers in. My best friend, Will Byers, whom I had known since I was 5 years old, was the youngest son of that family, and also my secret crush. Very secret. After all, just like me, he was a boy and not a girl. Will and I had always shared a special bond, and because he had so often been called a fag by his father and other students for his sensitive feminine nature, I had convinced myself for a while that he might have romantic feelings for me too. But to this day, I still didn't know whether he was actually gay or not. One thing, however, was painfully clear to me. I had reacted far too enthusiastically when my mother mentioned a few months ago that the Byers would be staying with us temporarily until they found a new home. In fact, it had originally been my idea to take them in, though at first my mother had refused. I still remembered the day Will, Joyce, and Jonathan had come to visit us. We had celebrated the graduation of our older siblings together, who also happened to be dating. Yep, the older brother of my crush was dating my older sister. Well, what are you supposed to do about that? The Byers had brought wine to celebrate with and stayed for lunch. I was just about to suggest I began after Joyce and Jonathan Byers complained about how difficult it had been to find a house that was affordable enough. Why don't you just stay with us? I swallowed my bite of potato and quickly glanced at Will. He looked at his mother, hopefully. That's very sweet of you, my mother began. Great, I interrupted enthusiastically. Will and I can just share my room, and you guys can, I don't know, Mom will figure something out. My mother cleared her throat. Mike. What? We can't ask that of you, Joyce Byers said gently. I wouldn't mind sharing a room with Mike, Will chimed in. It'd be like a sleepover. But my mother politely refused, and I let my shoulders slump in frustration. I don't get it, I muttered rebelliously, throwing another glance at Will. He looked disappointed too. Over the following days, I practically begged my mom every single day to let the Byers stay with us, especially because Will kept telling me how scared he was about what would happen once the military shelter shut down if they still hadn't found a home by then. "That's ridiculous, Mom. Will practically sleeps over at our house all the time anyway. So what difference does it make if he officially moves in? Or if Jonathan and Mrs. Byers stay here too? They need a place to stay, Mom, and we have more than enough room," I explained over and over again. "They could stay with Hopper, couldn't they? Joyce and Hopper are together now. At least, that's what Nancy told me. I thought he died when I sighed. "Hopper's cabin is way too small, Mom. Mrs. Byers could maybe stay there. But what about Will and Jonathan?" Apparently, she eventually started to feel guilty because, in the end, she offered it to them herself. I could hardly believe it when I found out my begging had actually worked, and the Byers would now be living with us until they found a new home. A part of me, buried deep down, had even hoped they wouldn't find one anytime soon, but I immediately felt ashamed for thinking that. Even though the world seemed to be falling apart and we were living in quarantine, I was doing better than I had the year before, when everything had appeared perfectly fine and the Byers had still been living in California. Nancy had pointed out several times how surprised she was by my eagerness to make room for Will's mattress in the basement. I had offered my mother multiple times to share my room with Will, but she insisted that Joyce should take my room. The Byers boys would sleep downstairs in the basement, and I would have to share a room with Nancy instead. She probably just wanted to make sure Nancy and Jonathan slept in separate rooms. Maybe my reaction had been a little too obvious when I spent the entire day complaining about how much I would have preferred sharing a room with Will, but Nancy simply ignored me. Still, could anyone really blame me for being happy to have my best friend back? I'll admit it, I was happy, truly happy, that he was living in Hawkins again instead of California. But there was also a downside to it. Ever since I started seeing Will every day again, I had been forced to question my sexuality, and that terrified me. My whole life, I had somehow felt wrong, like there was something fundamentally wrong with me. Up until then, I'd been able to push those thoughts away, especially whenever demogorgons were chasing us and our small town was hiding the secrets of the Upside Down. But Will intensified my identity crisis every damn time I looked at him. I had always known it. My feelings for him were different from the ones I felt for Dustin or Lucas. They were deeper, much deeper. For years, I had suppressed them. But during the year the Byers lived in California, I had finally been forced to admit to myself that I missed Will far more than I missed my girlfriend, Elle. By a lot. Even when I first found out they were both moving away together, I had been irritated, angry, and devastated by the thought of losing both Will and Elle all at once. After losing her adoptive father, Elle had basically become Will's stepsister, and somehow that fact unsettled me. The brother of my girlfriend was the boy I had been in love with for years. In a strange way, it was a relief when he moved in with us, while Elle got her adoptive father back and started living with him again in his cabin. Because, as it turned out, he had never actually died. Yeah, that's a long story, and explaining it right now would take forever. Anyway, back to my love life. It was that summer day in 1985, just a few weeks before high school started, when Nancy, Max, Dustin, Lucas, and I found out that the Byers were leaving Hawkins and moving to California. We were all gathered in the basement when Jonathan and Will told us the news. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. California? I had shouted across the room, pacing back and forth through the basement like a maniac. Why would you do that? I continued, unable to hide my frustration. My mom thinks it's for the best now that we can finally try to move on. She needs distance from Hawkins, and she thinks it would be good for Will and Elle too, Jonathan explained in his usual calm tone. And even though part of me understood it, I didn't want to accept it. High school without Will? Impossible. No more board games with Will? Impossible. No more sleepovers with Will? A life without Will? Impossible. I had spent the entire summer pushing him away, and now he was just going to be taken from me? Was this punishment for how I had treated him? I take it all back. I'm sorry, okay? Just don't take Will away from me. Please, not Will. Yeah, I actually started praying. This is ridiculous. What is this even supposed to fix? Mike, my older sister Nancy shouted, but I didn't care. I didn't care about anything. I just refused to accept it. I'm coming with you. I'll get a job after school if I have to. Mike, Mom would never allow that. You're staying here. End of discussion. But no buts. We're staying here. This is hard for me too, believe me. But you and Elle, you'll survive it. Elle. I had completely forgotten about her, and suddenly I felt guilty. They could just stay with us. Will and I can share my room, and Jonathan and Elle can stay in the basement. It's not a problem. Oh, and Mrs. Byers is just supposed to move to California alone? Mike, you're being ridiculous, Nancy interrupted again. You know just as well as I do that our parents would never allow that, and Mrs. Byers wouldn't either. Elle didn't say anything. She stared down at the floor, sadly. She missed Hopper, her adoptive father. That much was obvious. Will stared blankly ahead, trying desperately not to cry. He didn't want to leave. I could see it in his eyes, and I didn't want him to move away and leave me behind. He couldn't leave me. He just couldn't. What was I supposed to do without him? I couldn't imagine my life without him. I couldn't let him go, but what could I do? Can I talk to Mrs. Byers? Maybe she'll let me come with you after all? Will's eyes lit up. Yeah, please, Jonathan. Couldn't you let him talk to Mom? Forget it, Mike. Mom and Dad would never allow it, Nancy protested again. I don't care. The argument went on for at least another hour until Nancy finally won, and I had no choice but to accept it. I was going to lose Will. Again. Later, when only Will, Max, Dustin, Lucas, Elle, and I were left in the basement, and we decided to help them move, I still tried desperately to come up with a plan. We could just run away somewhere together, right? I said, hopefully, glancing briefly at Will. But no one agreed with me. And go where? Without money? Where are you even going to live? You want to just drop out of school? Dustin asked, while the others nodded in agreement. That was the moment I gave up, collapsed onto the couch, and cursed loudly. This is such bullshit. The mood in the room was heavy, and I had to use every ounce of strength I had not to burst into tears. Would you guys maybe want to, I began hesitantly, pausing for a moment. Finish Will's campaign? I don't know, so we can all hang out one more time before, well, I couldn't even say it out loud. Everyone except Elle and Max agreed. The two of them wanted to help Joyce clean out Hopper's cabin, and honestly, I preferred it that way. One evening with just Dustin, Lucas, and especially Will, that was exactly what I needed before he left. No girlfriends, just like old times. But the disappointment of losing Will wouldn't leave me alone. I had already lost him too many times. And Elle, too. Why was it always Will and Elle, the two most important people in my life? What made everything even worse was that I couldn't tell anyone that after Eleven's goodbye kiss, I had realized I was actually in love with my best friend. And that those feelings weren't just going to disappear because I had a girlfriend. I had been happy when Elle confessed her love to me and kissed me extra long before leaving. My ego felt flattered, but at the same time, I hadn't felt anything. No excitement, no desire, and most of all, no love. Instead, while kissing her, I kept thinking about Will, imagining that it was his lips touching mine. Every time I thought about Elle, guilt washed over me. I cared about her so much. She meant the world to me, just not romantically, no matter how desperately I tried to convince myself otherwise. After the buyers moved away, I thought about Will constantly. Almost every evening after dinner, I would take out the drawings he had made for me and stare at them, even though I already knew every single detail by heart. And every time, I found myself wondering who he was spending time with now, and whether he missed me as much as I missed him. I cried myself to sleep almost every night, and whenever my mother asked why I seemed so sad, I told her it was because I missed my girlfriend. She always gave me a skeptical look afterward, which only made everything worse, because then I felt like the biggest liar on earth. Why was I lying? Maybe because my best friend, the boy I was in love with, wasn't a girl. Maybe because everyone in Hawkins would hate me if they found out. Maybe because Elle and my family, especially my father, would be ashamed of me. And maybe because my best friend, the most important person in my life, would ignore me forever if he knew the truth. So, I stayed silent. The nights where I was haunted by the memories of the summer of 1985. The summer I treated Will like he was nothing but air, because I thought that if I pushed him away hard enough, my feelings for him would finally disappear, were the worst nights of all. I never truly forgave myself for the words I had thrown at him during our fight. Back then, Will wanted to play D&D with me and Lucas almost every day, but we didn't want to because we were too busy talking about our girlfriends and ignored him because of it. At least, that was the official version. The truth was, I ignored him because deep down I blamed him for the fact that I didn't feel normal. Because he was the only boy I felt strangely drawn to. Because I thought I had to learn how to act like a straight boyfriend. I convinced myself that if I ignored Will long enough, these feelings would eventually disappear, that I would simply grow out of it. But one day, Will got tired of being ignored. We argued outside my garage while rain lashed against the garage roof. He was angry, really angry, and accused me of being a terrible friend. The moment when he called my girlfriend stupid, I snapped. Elle isn't stupid. It's not my fault you don't like girls. What did you think? That we'd never get girlfriends? That we'd spend the rest of our lives sitting in my basement playing games all day? Those words burned themselves into my memory. Every single time I thought about them, my stomach twisted painfully because nowadays I know that I had projected my own fears and desires onto him. What the hell had I been thinking? I felt horrible about it, and the worst part was that Will had only quietly replied, Yeah, I did. I really did." It was practically a confession. He had admitted that he wanted to spend the rest of his life with me, and finding out he was moving to California completely shattered my heart. I had never felt so miserable in my life, except for the day they found Will's fake body in Lover's Lake. But the worst part of all was that I couldn't talk to anyone about it. I couldn't explain that I felt this devastated because I had realized I would probably love my best friend forever, and it felt like I had already lost him. I almost confessed everything to Dustin once, but in the end, I didn't have the courage. So instead, I only revealed a tiny fraction of what I was really feeling. "It's not the end of the world, Mike. Seriously," Dustin had tried to reassure me as we walked out of the now empty buyer's house. They had just moved away, and of course, he had noticed how miserable I was. "I know," I had answered. Between Elle and Will," I paused, desperately trying to figure out how to explain myself without making my feelings for Will too obvious. "It just feels like I keep losing them over and over again." I had almost told him the truth, that I was in love with Will, that I hated myself for ignoring him all summer, that the thought of my girlfriend and the boy I had loved for years living together without me made me sick. And worst of all, that Will's new friends would probably be cooler than me, funnier, kinder, better, that they would treat him so much better than I ever had, that one day he'd realize I never deserved him in the first place. Before he left, Will had practically promised me he wouldn't replace me. While packing, he had placed our favorite game, Dungeons and Dragons, into a donation box. When I pointed it out, all I said was, "Dude, that's the donation box." Will smiled at me softly. "I know, I'll just use yours when I come back. I mean, if we still want to play." It felt like we were talking about something entirely different. Like D&D was only an excuse. Like we were really talking about whether we would still belong to each other despite the distance. "Yeah, but what if you want to join another party?" I had asked. I still remember the awful feeling in my stomach. I was terrified of his answer. I didn't want to be replaced. I didn't want him playing with anyone else, not D&D, and not anything else either. To me, it always felt like the end of the world whenever it seemed like Will was replacing me, or whenever he simply wasn't with me, and yet I still wanted to be a good friend. I truly wanted him to be happy. Will gave me a shy smile. "Impossible," he said, and with that one word, he assured me that I was irreplaceable. I still remember the relief that washed over me in that moment. As long as he was close to me and still needed me, I could ignore my feelings, but when he moved away, I finally understood just how deep those feelings really were. Because once he lived in California, he barely called me anymore. The phone line was always busy, and eventually his letters became shorter too, until he barely wrote at all, and the disappointment I felt over that was enormous. So enormous that I complained about it to Dustin more than once. "I thought we were his best friends," I said one afternoon during lunch in the fall of 1985 while we waited for Eddie. "I mean, we were the ones who saved him. We never gave up on him, and when he was possessed, I was there for him. Me. And now that he moved away, he just forgets about me. I mean us. Every single time I call the buyer's house, the line is busy. Every single time. I call every day. Angrily, I stabbed at my salad. I completely lost my appetite." "I know," Dustin replied with his mouth full. "Joyce got a new job, one where she does advertising over the phone." At first, I felt relieved, because that meant Will probably wasn't spending all day talking to new friends, but then it hit me. "Wait, you talked to him? How did you even get through?" "He called me." Frustration crashed over me instantly. "He called you? Do you think I stopped mattering to him? I just feel like, I don't know, like I lost him. Maybe he's still mad at me about last summer." Frustrated, I buried my face in my hands and fought back tears. "Don't be mad," Dustin said. "Maybe it's a good sign. Maybe he finally got a girlfriend, and you know how it is when someone's newly in love. They have less time for their friends. You were the same. My chest tightened painfully. Will and a girl? Never, I shouted, and Dustin stared at me in surprise. Why not? Just because he didn't meet anyone here doesn't mean he won't meet someone in California. That's ridiculous. Will isn't like that. He's different, special. Besides, he would have told me. Okay, Dustin muttered. It was one of the worst school days of my life. That same day, I called the buyer's house 3 times. No answer. No call back.
Sorry, the number you have reached is not in service. Please check the number or try your call again. This is a recording.
And whenever he finally did call me, I could never find the right words because I was too scared to ask him how he was doing without me, or whether he had actually met someone. Mostly because I wanted to spare myself the heartbreak if the answer was yes. I didn't want to hear how perfectly his life worked without me, so our conversation stayed shallow, cold, and extremely unsatisfying. Except for one time. Dustin, Lucas, and I had originally planned a movie night, but none of us were really in the mood, so Dustin suddenly suggested calling Will in California instead. And when we actually got through and I heard his voice, I became so nervous that I only could get out a simple, "Hey, Will." I held on to the phone so tightly, as if I could somehow keep him with me that way. We talked about Hellfire, Californian food, and Dustin's science fair project. It was easier talking to Will when I wasn't alone with him on the phone, because then I didn't feel like my feelings for him might accidentally slip out. Even while writing letters, I realized my feelings for Will had long since become stronger than the ones I had for my girlfriend. Deep down, I think I had already known it the day he left, but it hit me like a truck every time I tried signing Elle's letters with love. Every single time I sat at my desk trying to write those words, something inside me resisted. It felt wrong, almost like betrayal, toward Will. But whenever I wrote to him, love appeared beneath my words naturally. Dear Will, how are you? It was really nice seeing you again on Thanksgiving. You've grown a little taller, haven't you? Why do you barely call anymore, anyway? Have you already made so many new friends that you don't have time for me anymore? Every time I call your house, the line is busy. Hawkins seriously sucks without you. Lucas hangs out with the cool kids now and suddenly plays basketball. Dustin is constantly with Eddie or visiting Steve and Robin at work more often than he visits me, and Max mostly ignores us. You have no idea how much I miss you. Do you still draw? Is California really as warm as people say? How's school? Please tell me you miss me too. I honestly don't even know what I'm supposed to write. I regret not spending more time with you last summer, and I'm sorry for being such an asshole to you. I just didn't want to. Never mind. Are you coming to visit us for Christmas? I'll ask Eddie again if you can play D&D with us like I promised. I already asked him once, and he said yes, but sometimes he's kind of forgetful. Honestly, at first, I didn't even want to join his club, because D&D without you just isn't the same. But Dustin convinced me, and I have to admit, it's the only thing that still feels right since you moved away. I hope we see each other soon. Love, Mike. Dear Will, have you made new friends yet? Elle says California is amazing. I really miss you. Do you miss me too? I'm working on a birthday present for you right now. I know it's a little early, but I just needed to do something that makes me feel close to you. Does that make sense? It's a handmade silver bear pendant, made from metal, wire, and even 2 old D&D dice. I know you like tigers more than bears, but there's a deeper meaning behind it. Do you remember when your dad forced you to go to that summer camp for a week? You were scared to stay there without me or Jonathan around. Back then, I gave you my stuffed teddy bear for luck so he could protect you, and you were so happy about it. This summer, when we were shopping for an apology gift for Elle, I saw a silver bear in a display case and immediately thought about you and that stupid summer camp. But the one in the store was way too expensive, so I thought, I'll just make one myself. Maybe we're too old for teddy bears now, but I wanted you to have something that reminds you of us, so you won't forget me. And maybe also because it makes me feel like I can still somehow protect you. Ever since last summer, I've been terrified that we're drifting apart, and I think that's my fault. I even wrote a new D&D campaign before you officially left, in the hope that you'd stay. Stupid, right? I'm still working on it. It's only meant for us, for you, Lucas, Dustin, and me, not for Eddie. So you'll finally come visit us again. I'm also sending you a mixtape, and don't worry, Should I Stay or Should I Go is on it. I know it's your favorite song. Sorry I couldn't finish it before you left, but you mean so much to me, and it's just been so long since all of us were together. Honestly, that's why I'm still writing the campaign. Because part of me hopes you'll stay here in Hawkins once it's finished. You could just live with us, and we could share my room. I'm sure my mom wouldn't mind. Nancy says she'd never allow it, but I keep trying to convince her. You're coming for Christmas, right? Please promise me you'll spend Christmas break here. I already planned everything for your guys' visit. A movie marathon. You get to choose the movies. The D&D campaign. And I even bought new comics I wanted to show you and talk about. I figured Elle could do something with Max in the meantime, or whatever. I just want things to be like they used to be again. I want our friendship to last forever, no matter how far apart we live. Love, Mike. Dear Will, I think about you every day. Today I talked to Dustin about you, and he thinks you have a girlfriend now because you barely call anymore, and I just can't believe that. I told him you definitely would have told me if that were true. You don't have a girlfriend, right? And why is your phone line always busy whenever I call? Love, Mike. Dear Will, I was honestly really upset that you couldn't come for Christmas. I know your mom couldn't afford 3 plane tickets, but honestly, that doesn't make it hurt any less. I was really angry that you didn't tell me beforehand, and that I only found out at the airport. How did you spend Christmas? Did you celebrate with friends or with your family? Do you have new friends? Are they cooler than me? Maybe you didn't even want to come because now you have friends who don't treat you like air, and that's why you gave Elle the ticket instead, right? You don't miss me at all. And honestly, I get it. After the way I treated you last summer, I probably wouldn't miss me either. I've been thinking about moving to California once I finish school. Maybe we could get an apartment together and go to college together or something. What do you think? I was really sad and disappointed that we couldn't spend Christmas break together. Don't get me wrong, I was happy that at least Elle could come, but December 26th was always our day, remember? We'd play with our new gifts, stay up all night watching Christmas movies, and constantly come up with new comic stories together. I miss that so much. Will, you mean so much to me. I just don't want to lose you. I spent all of November looking forward to seeing you again over Christmas break, and when I found out you couldn't come, I annoyed my mom so much that she finally offered to pay for a ticket during spring break. So, now I'm coming to visit you for your birthday instead. I kept telling her it was an emergency because it was your birthday, and I absolutely had to give you the gift I'd been working on for so long. And somehow, It worked. So now I'm coming to visit you in spring. What do you think? I'm already so excited to see you again. Are you excited too? I think about you a lot. Love, Mike. Dear Will, why don't you call? Why do you call Dustin, but not me? Mike. Dear Will, I found out from Elle's letter that you've been drawing a lot lately, and that one of the paintings might be for a girl. Is that true? What's her name? Is she pretty? How much do you like her? On a scale from 1 to 10? You practically disappeared for half a year, and I'm so angry at you. You promised you wouldn't replace me, but maybe I just read too much into it back then. Maybe it really was only about D&D. But the truth is, you're never even going to read this letter. I'm flying out to see you tomorrow, and I never sent you any of the other letters either. So, screw it. I was actually really looking forward to seeing you again tomorrow, but now I don't even know how I'm supposed to act around you. I don't want to lose you. I don't want to meet your new friends, and especially not that girl. Maybe I'll just leave your birthday present back in Hawkins. It probably wouldn't mean anything to you anyway. Mike. Instead of sending the letters, the mixtape, or the gift, I hid everything away in a red box beneath my bed. In hindsight, it was probably a good decision, because from Elle's letter, I learned that Will apparently liked a girl, and had even dedicated a painting to her that he refused to show her. For him, that was a huge deal, because until then, only Joyce, his mom, Jonathan or I had ever received his drawings. Not even Dustin or Lucas had ever gotten one without a special reason. If someone received a drawing from Will, it meant that person mattered to him. So when Will picked me up from the airport in the spring of 1986, together with Elle, Jonathan, and Argyle, carrying one of his paintings with him but refusing to show it to me, the realization hit me like a punch to the gut. I had lost my importance to him, because I had always been one of the people who got to see his art, whether it had been meant for me or not. 11 hadn't seen it, even though she had basically become his sister by then, and I hadn't seen it because I no longer mattered to him the way I once had. And on top of that, I knew the painting had to be for that special girl. In the past, he would have at least told me about her, shown me the painting anyway. But apparently, he didn't want to tell me anything anymore. It felt like a knife twisting in my chest. My jealousy burned so violently, and my anger screamed so loudly inside me that I couldn't even hug him when he tried to greet me, let alone wish him a happy birthday. At the time, I honestly believed he wanted to give the painting to that girl named Angela at the Rinkomania skating rink because of the way he hesitantly reacted when Elle mentioned her name. Only later did I realize I had misunderstood everything. It turned out that Will had only reacted strangely because Angela was Eleven's bully, not her friend, like Elle had claimed. And he had actually been angry at me because he thought he had become irrelevant to me. After all, he had never received a single letter from me, and because his mother was constantly on the phone, he had no idea I'd been trying to call him all the time. And the painting, well, apparently, the painting had been meant for me.
Spring, California, 1986.
It was a hot spring day in California in 1986 when Will, Argyle, Jonathan, and I were driving through the desert searching for my girlfriend, Elle. Jonathan was driving. Argyle stared tiredly out the window, and I pretended to study the map in my hands. In reality, all I could think about was how I was supposed to explain to Elle that I didn't love her the way she deserved once we found her again. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed Will watching me. He looked worried. He always did. He had always been a good friend, and I was painfully aware that I was currently ruining our friendship because of my stupid feelings for him. I was still irritated because he had brought that painting, the same painting I believed was meant for some girl he liked. On top of that, I was frustrated because we still couldn't find 11. Then his voice suddenly pulled me from my thoughts. "How far is Nina from Vegas?" I looked at him with a confused expression, but the second I saw his sweet smile, all my anger vanished. "If Susie's coordinates are right, about 90 miles. Why?" "Once we save her, we could stop in Vegas on the way back," Will suggested. "Elle could make us super rich. Then we'd never have to work again. We could just retire and spend the rest of our lives playing Dungeons and Dragons and Nintendo." He smiled at me, but I couldn't smile back. All I could think about was that summer when I had treated him like he didn't matter, even though deep down I had always secretly wanted to spend my life with him. One day, Elle would leave me. And then what? Then my disguise would finally fall apart. I was terrified of losing her, and at the same time, I couldn't imagine a life without Will. Those 8 months without him had nearly driven me insane. I needed him, desperately. If I stayed with Elle forever, I'd be living a lie forever. But someday Will would probably fall in love with a girl, and once Elle no longer needed me, I'd be left alone, forced to watch everyone else become happy. That summer had taught me that ignoring my feelings changed nothing. Distance hadn't weakened them either. If anything, it had made them stronger. For a long time, I'd convinced myself Will was the reason I was attracted to men, but I had finally realized that wasn't true. By then I found lots of men attractive. Eddie Munson, random guys from gym class, male models on posters, even the guy standing beside Angela the first time I met her. But with Will, it was different. It wasn't just attraction. Sure, he was pretty. I thought he was incredibly attractive, but my feelings for him went far beyond that. Much deeper, and those feelings terrified me. Terrified me that one day he'd replace me with a girl. Terrified me that he'd fall in love with someone who wasn't me. Terrified of rejection. Terrified of losing our friendship. "We're gonna make it, Mike. She'll be okay." Will's voice pulled me back into the van. He thought I was worried about Elle. "I know," I stammered. "But what if this is over and she realizes she doesn't need me anymore?" Deep down, I already knew I had only started dating Elle because she needed me. Lucas and Dustin had constantly teased me about liking her, so I figured that must mean love. She was cool, she had superpowers, and she didn't look like other girls. When I first met her, the entire town of Hawkins thought she was a boy because she had no hair. I liked that about her, but the truth was, I had always wanted a relationship with Will. "Of course she'll need you," Will said immediately. "She'll always need you." I had hoped he would say that he would always need me, but he was, as always, just being a good friend. "You're scared of losing her," he said softly. I nodded, because that part was true. I was terrified that if I told Elle the truth, she'd never speak to me again. I was terrified she'd hate me if I admitted I was attracted to boys. She could accuse me of using her all these years, and honestly, I wouldn't even blame her for it. Elle meant so much to me. I never wanted to break her heart. And then it happened. Slowly, Will pulled the rolled-up painting from his backpack and handed it to me. My heart stopped beating for a moment. Was it me? Was I the person from Elle's letter? With trembling fingers, I unrolled the painting and immediately smiled so hard my cheeks hurt. It was a painting of our favorite game, Dungeons and Dragons. Our characters stood together before a giant red three-headed dragon and my character was leading the group. A heart had been painted onto my crest, making my real heart pound wildly inside my chest. Could this actually be real? Was I the person from Elle's letter? Was I Will's crush? Am I dreaming? Is my greatest wish really coming true right now? "This is amazing," I whispered. I had to ask him if he had painted it for me. I had to know if I was the one he loved. So I gathered every ounce of courage I had and asked like a complete idiot, "You painted this?" Disappointment flooded me instantly when Will answered while staring out the window. Yeah. I mean, Elle asked me to. She commissioned it. Basically, she told me what to draw. So it had come from Elle after all. Maybe she hadn't painted it herself, but it had been her idea. Meaning, I wasn't the person from her letter, and Will probably really did like someone else, because in that same letter, 11 had written that she had never seen the painting he was making for the person he cared about. Frustrated, I stared down at the artwork. 11 barely knew our D&D characters. She wasn't even in the painting herself, and yet it was supposed to come from her. Was I just his best friend? Someone he wanted to cheer up? My chest tightened painfully. Anyway, my point is, do you see how you're leading us here? Will said softly, pointed at the heart painted on my character's crest, and lightly brushed my arm with his fingers. Heat rushed through my body instantly, and suddenly concentrating on his words became almost impossible. That's what you do. And do you see your coat of arms here? It's a heart. I know it's sort of on the nose, but that's what holds this whole party together. Heart. Because, without heart, we'd all fall apart. Even Elle. Especially Elle. As he kept talking, my eyes practically glued themselves to his lips. My thoughts kept circling around the warmth of his skin against my arm. The past few months, she's been so lost without you. She's just so different from other people, and his voice grew quieter. When you're different, sometimes you feel like a mistake. Now he was looking at me with glassy eyes. But you make her feel like she's not a mistake at all, like she's better for being different, and that gives her the courage to fight on. Something in his words wouldn't let go of me. I constantly had the feeling he was really talking about himself, even though he kept saying my girlfriend's name. Only a few days earlier, 11 and I had fought, and she had confessed that I'd looked at her like she was a monster. She thought I was afraid of her, and honestly, she wasn't entirely wrong. Sometimes I really was afraid of her. I just never wanted to admit it. So were these actually his feelings? I listened carefully as he continued. If she was mean to you, or she seemed like she was pushing you away, it's probably because she's scared of losing you, just like you're scared of losing her. And if she was going to lose you, I think she'd rather get it over with quick, like ripping off a bandage. So, yeah, Elle needs you, Mike, and she always will. By the end of his beautiful speech, he looked seconds away from crying. But I couldn't ignore the fact that it sounded like he was talking about himself. The day after our fight at Rinkomania, I had apologized to Will by admitting I felt like I was losing him. And that was why I'd been so angry. Now this confession felt like an answer to mine, but I still wasn't sure whether he was really talking about himself. So I quietly asked, "Yeah?" "Yeah," he answered with a smile. For the rest of the drive, he stared out the window. I thought I heard him quietly crying, but I didn't ask about it, because at that moment, I realized I would have to break up with Elle as soon as we found her. Things simply couldn't continue like this anymore, but everything turned out differently. Right before I could finally do it, Argyle interrupted us. Then Elle had to fight Vecna, and Will was the one who encouraged me to confess my love to her in order to help her survive. "Mike, don't stop! You're the heart!" Will had shouted those words at me, even using the painting to convince me, and that was the moment I realized he probably really had been talking about Elle all along. Because if he loved me, wouldn't helping me confess my love to someone else destroy him? I knew exactly what it felt like to encourage someone you loved to do something that shattered your own heart. When I once pushed Will to dance with a girl at the snowball, the image haunted me for weeks. But Will didn't seem bothered by me confessing my love to Elle. He supported our relationship so much that eventually I had to admit to myself, the painting probably really had been her idea. To this day, I still don't know whether he liked that girl from California, and I still don't know for certain whether the painting was truly Elle's idea. But I do know that Will would never lie to me. He was one of the most honest people I had ever known, and he took his art seriously. Whenever I imagined him one day introducing a woman as his girlfriend to me, it made me physically sick. It felt like a dragon breathing fire inside my stomach. He wasn't like me. He probably didn't find boys attractive or sexy, and honestly, any girl would be lucky to one day be with him. If our friendship was supposed to last forever, then I had to finally learn to accept that he wasn't into men, but that was easier said than done, because I was already jealous whenever there was even the slightest possibility that he might fall in love. With Max, with the girl from Elle's letter, or with the girl from the snowball. Which was exactly why never sending him those letters had been such a good decision. Under no circumstances could Will ever find out about my feelings, because that would mean losing him forever. It would mean him finding me disgusting, pulling away from me, and I never would have forgiven myself for that. I had already lost him too many times. First he was kidnapped, then he became a spy, and just when everything finally seemed over, the buyers moved away.
Hawkins, summer, 1986.
It was a summer day in 1986. I was sitting on the couch with Nancy and the rest of my family, watching the news, when we learned that the military was claiming everything had been caused by an earthquake, while keeping the real reason for the events in Hawkins a secret. Suddenly, the phone rang. My mother answered, and I took the opportunity to grab Nancy by the wrist and talk to her. "They're making it look like it was an earthquake. Can you believe that?" I whispered. "They just want to cover everything up." "I know, Mike. I just watched the news too," my older sister replied, rolling her eyes dramatically, but I could see the fear hidden behind her expression. "But what did you expect?" she continued. "That they'd just tell the people of Hawkins the truth?" Just as I was about to reply, my mom interrupted us. "Mike, it's for you. It's Will." My heart seemed to stop for several seconds. Lately, that was always what happened whenever I heard his name, saw his face, or even caught his scent. Yeah, okay, then I'll just go to the kitchen. Yeah." I stumbled over my words, noticed Nancy's confused expression, hurried into the kitchen, and gripped the phone receiver tightly. "Hello, Will?" I tried to sound casual, but I was pretty sure I failed miserably. "Hey, Mike." Will's voice sounded exactly as it always did, gentle, careful, and unbearably innocent. I wanted to casually ask why he was calling, but somehow no words would leave my mouth. "I'm only calling because, I just wanted to let you know that we decided to make a stop in Missouri and spend the night there. Just for one night, of course, but it's going to delay our trip home a little." He spoke calmly, as if he'd somehow read my mind. "He's calling me just to tell me they'll arrive tomorrow instead?" Every ounce of anger I'd felt toward the military vanished instantly. My heart practically burst with excitement. "Mike? Huh? You still there? Thanks, for calling," I blurted out, before my brain had coordinated it with my mouth. Then I quickly added, "How's Argyle doing?" Will laughed softly, and immediately I felt my face turn pink. His laugh had always made me nervous. "Jonathan convinced him it was just the weed," Will said, amusement creeping into his voice. "If he actually believed him, he'll probably warn his future grandchildren about marijuana and tell them about the time he got so high he thought he'd driven across California to save a superhero." I burst out laughing so hard I could barely breathe. From the other end of the line, I could hear that Will wasn't doing much better. "Honestly, he probably didn't believe him anyway," I said, once I'd finally managed to calm down. "Yeah, probably, but Jonathan's definitely going to miss him." "Definitely, I already miss him, and I only knew him for a few weeks." Silence settled between us for a moment, but something inside me refused to hang up. "Have you talked to Dustin or Lucas yet?" I asked. "They're saying it really was an earthquake. They're sealing up the gates with metal plates and reopening the school." "What?" I rarely heard Will raise his voice, but that information genuinely seemed to upset him. "No, I wasn't planning on calling them. How's Max? Any news?" There it was again, that flutter in my chest. He had called only me, just to tell me that he'd be arriving tomorrow. "Mike? Huh? Max? Oh, right, no news yet, unfortunately. Damn. Hey, Will, so, when you get here tomorrow, where are you guys staying? Should I ask my mom if you can stay with us? I was already planning to ask because, well, now that you don't really have a house anymore, I figured..." "That's really sweet, Mike, and if it were up to me, I'd accept immediately. But Mom said she managed to get us a place at one of those military shelters for a while." "Oh." The disappointment was obvious in my voice, but I didn't care. I hated the idea of Will staying there when he could have stayed with us instead. The thought of having him around every day made my face heat up all over again. At least then I'd know he was safe, because one thing was certain. Until the day we finally defeated Vecna for good, I wasn't leaving his side. Will had a strange connection to Vecna that none of us could fully explain, and it terrified me. Absolutely terrified me. "Well, then I'll help you move in instead," I said, absent-mindedly wrapping the phone cord around my fingers. "About what time are you arriving? I could meet you at the shelter." "You really don't have to do that. Wouldn't you rather visit Elle during training?" There it was again. Will's newfound determination to encourage me to focus on my relationship with Elle, but honestly, I was a lot less worried about 11 than I was about him. At least she had superpowers to protect herself. "I'm not exactly much help to her anyway," I said. "And besides, she finally has Hopper back. I think she'd rather spend time with him than with me right now." "You guys still haven't talked?" Will asked carefully. "I thought everything was okay between you two again after your, declaration of..." I heard him swallow on the other end of the line before continuing, his voice noticeably more fragile. "Love in the spring, so why aren't you talking with each other?" Let me think. Maybe because Elle had realized I'd lied during that whole love confession. Maybe she'd sensed that I'd basically stolen Eddie's words. Back then, Eddie had described the clothes Dustin and me were wearing the day he first met us, and when I confessed my love to Elle, I'd suddenly remembered that conversation and told her I still remembered exactly what shirt she'd been wearing the day we'd found her in the woods. That it had been love at first sight, but I didn't even believe in love at first sight. I only knew that most people did, especially Argyle, who had somehow fallen in love with Eden the very day we met her while trying to save 11. It's a long story. Anyway, maybe Elle had realized I wasn't being completely honest. Maybe that was why she barely wanted to talk to me, or maybe she blamed me for losing to Vecna, for failing to save Hawkins. Honestly, I wouldn't blame her because I blamed myself too. I was terrified of talking to her about our relationship, terrified of admitting that I'd lied. Mike? Oh, I don't know, I said. I think she's still blaming herself for not listening to Dr. Brenner back then. I paused. Anyway, what time exactly are you getting here tomorrow? Since Will had returned to Hawkins, we spent more time together than ever before. Even before he moved into our house, I saw him almost every day. We played Nintendo, watched movies, or went for walks. I invited him over so often that my family started noticing. Nancy even brought it up once. He's basically your brother now. No, my older sister frowned, and I quickly added, he's just bored in that military shelter. There's nothing to do there all day, and I'm bored without him too. Dustin isn't himself anymore. Lucas spends every day at the hospital with Max, and you're constantly hanging out with Robin nowadays. We need each other. That's true, Mike, Nancy replied seriously. But thanks to Will's boredom, we at least found out that the military built a base in the Upside Down. Still, he doesn't have to spend all day there, I muttered. Whenever I went a day or two without seeing him, I'd ride my bike to the shelter and pick him up. Sometimes I planned it. Sometimes I just showed up. Either way, Will was always happy to see me, and that alone was enough reason to visit him nearly every day. One of those September days in 1986, we were out walking together again. By then, much of the town had already been covered in metal plates, and those walks with Will were my favorite part of that September. Somehow, they always felt like romantic dates. You don't believe me? I laughed, nudging him with my elbow. I believe you, he said. It just doesn't make any sense. It absolutely makes sense, Will. You'd make a great therapist. No, seriously, an amazing therapist. I don't know. Yes, you would. You make people open up to you. Will blushed and smiled. If I were your therapist, he said eventually, and my heart immediately started pounding faster, I'd diagnose you as a control freak. I laughed. A control freak? Yeah, he replied, grinning. You're the dungeon master. You always want to decide how the story ends. You hate unexpected changes. I let his words sink in and stayed quiet for a moment. If you were my therapist, I asked carefully, and you knew that was probably the only reason Elle and I are still together, what would you tell me? Will stopped walking and looked at me with a horrified expression. I think, he said after a long pause, I tell you to listen to your heart. What does it tell you? I stared at the ground. It tells me I want something I know I can never have. Will was silent for several seconds before quietly saying, I know that feeling. My heart stopped. What do you want that you know you can't have? But he avoided the question. Okay, if I end up becoming a therapist, where do you end up? We started walking again. Oh, that's easy. I'm going to be a writer. It's the only thing I'm good at. That's not true, Will protested immediately. You have lots of talents. Bullshit. I'm not Will Byers. I can't paint, draw, get people to reveal all their secrets, but I am definitely going to write about him someday. Will stared at me. You want to write about me? Sure, I mean, I'd like to write about all of this someday. About you, me, Lucas, Dustin, Max, and 11. We've been through so much. But it all started with you disappearing. So you'd be the main character. The main character? He repeated. I'd be honored. He smiled shyly, and warmth spread through my chest. Yeah, I don't know if I ever told you this, but when you disappeared and they pulled your, well, not your body, but the fake body, out of the lake, I would have believed anything to avoid accepting it. Anything. Monsters, superpowers, another dimension hidden beneath Hawkins. Literally anything. Will stopped walking again. His eyes became glassy. Mine started burning too, and for a moment, we simply stood there, staring into each other's eyes without saying a word. I felt hot, and the tension between us was impossible to ignore. I swallowed hard and desperately searched for a way to lighten the mood, so I gently nudged his shoulder and grinned. How about ice cream? Scoops Ahoy opened a new location after the mall closed. Will brightened immediately. I'd love to. The rest of the morning, we laughed, drank milkshakes, and completely ignored the quarantine curfew. By the time we headed back toward the military shelter, it was getting late, and both of us were complaining about stomach aches. How can anyone choose pineapple? I asked dramatically. Will smiled. As if the pineapple is the problem. We just had way too much ice cream. We should have shared a shake. Without thinking, I reached for his hand, the one holding his milkshake, and took a sip from his pineapple shake. Our hands touched. Our eyes met. And suddenly, I got so nervous that I nearly choked. You okay? Will laughed, patting my back. For a moment, it felt like he left his hand there longer than necessary, though I was probably imagining it. Definitely, I coughed. It's definitely the pineapple. After a longer silence, Will suddenly asked, Do Lucas and Dustin not have time again for the usual reasons? I knew exactly what he meant. Lucas spent most of his time at the hospital with Max, and since Eddie's death, Dustin had withdrawn from almost everyone. But that wasn't the real reason I never invited them. The truth was that I loved being alone with Will. I wanted him all to myself, especially after spending 8 months without him. Do you have a problem spending time alone with me? I teased. No, he said immediately. I really enjoy it. I just hope they don't feel left out. Therapist Mr. Byers worrying about everyone again, Will smiled. You really think I could do it? Be a therapist? Of course. You've always been an incredible listener, and like I said, people feel safe around you when they open up emotionally. I couldn't handle any of this without you. Will smiled again, and I couldn't even put into words how much I loved seeing him smile. Even more when I was the reason for him to do it. By the time we reached the military shelter, it was already dark. I walked him all the way to the entrance gate. You don't have to walk me all the way here, Will said. I need to get my bike anyway, I said quickly. Besides, who knows if they'll even let you back in after we ignored the curfew? Will shrugged. Guess I'll find out. I'll wait outside just in case. If they don't let you in, you can come home with me and stay at our place. Will looked grateful, and for a moment, we simply smiled at each other. I had a good time today, I murmured, staring nervously at the ground while picking up my bike. Me too, Will said softly. My heart raced. If this had been a real date, I probably would have kissed him right then, shy, nervous, but sincere. Except it wasn't a date, and it never will be. I had a girlfriend whose friendship mattered to me, and Will was a boy. See you tomorrow? I called after him impulsively. Will turned around before stepping through the gate. Yeah, I'd like that. Noon? I'll pick you up. You better not be late. Never. I would never be late for our dates. On the days I wasn't spending with Will, I focused on making plans to defeat Vecna. One evening during curfew hours, I visited Max and Lucas at the hospital and brought flowers from Elle. I sat beside Lucas on an uncomfortable chair and watched Max lying in her hospital bed. She was still in a coma. Lucas had her favorite song, Running Up That Hill by Kate Bush, playing again in hopes that she would finally wake up. She looked like Sleeping Beauty. Her wavy red hair was braided over her shoulder. Her breathing was slow and steady. And now that her casts and bandages had been removed, she looked as though she were simply asleep. According to Lucas, her bones had healed almost completely. If she ever woke up, her body would be in remarkably good condition, physically. Mentally, however, the doctors had no answers. They called it the strangest case they had ever seen. As I watched her, my chest ached. We'd never been best friends, but I missed her. Still no improvement? I asked Lucas quietly, who was watching his girlfriend with a sad expression. No, he answered shortly. The tape ended, and he got up to rewind it. Thanks for the flowers. After sitting down again, Lucas explained what the doctors had told him while I rambled on about plans for defeating Vecna. You've changed since you came back from California, Lucas suddenly said. I looked at him. What do you mean? I don't know. You're more like the old Mike again. The one willing to do anything to save his friends, like when Will disappeared. My heart skipped a beat. Maybe he wasn't wrong. After all, Will was the main reason I wanted Vecna defeated as quickly as possible, and I still couldn't stop thinking about what he had said in California. You lead us. You inspire us. Even if the words had supposedly come from Elle, part of me could never shake the feeling that they were really his. I'm worried about Will, I admitted. Just saying it aloud felt like a relief. Since Will had sensed Vecna's presence again after returning to Hawkins, I barely let him out of my sight. At first, I'd hoped Vecna had died when Nancy, Robin, Steve, and Dustin attacked him. But after Will told me he could still feel him, panic had settled permanently in my chest. Why couldn't this ever end? Hadn't Will suffered enough? Because of his connection to Vecna? Lucas asked. I nodded. What if we defeat Vecna and something happens to Will because of it? They're connected somehow, and back then, when he was a spy for the Upside Down, he would have sacrificed himself without hesitation to save us. That's just who he is. He's brave. Too brave, if you ask me. I swallowed hard. I know it's selfish to talk about my problems while you're sitting here every day, hoping your girlfriend wakes up. But I just got him back. I can't lose him again, especially after our stupid fight. Fight? You two fought in California? I groaned. I don't want to burden you with it. Too late. Now tell me, I sighed. I was an idiot. No kidding. Continue. I rolled my eyes. I was mad because he barely called me during those 8 months. Lucas immediately buried his face in his hands. Oh my God, Mike. Please tell me, he groaned, that you handled it like an adult. Nope, I ignored him on his birthday. Then I felt so guilty afterward that I couldn't even bring myself to wish him a happy birthday later. Oh my God, Mike. I know, but I apologized the next day. I explained everything and we made up. It's just, if something happens to him now, I'll never forgive myself. Lucas stared at me. Seriously, Mike, when it comes to Will, you get weird. Heat rushed into my face. But don't worry, Lucas said with a small smile. He'll be okay, and Elle will too.
11. Right.
I smiled back. And Max too.
Not So Best Friends on AO3.